We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk some more about the New York Football Giants, more positively this time, around their defense because it's looking definitely better than their offense, at least in my opinion it is. Not because of how the offense is looking in comparison to the defense, but just because last year this New York Giants defense was arguably just as bad because they were allowing the sixth most total touchdowns per game at 361. They were also at the bottom of the NFL, allowing the seventh most points per game at about 24 points per game as a defense. And because of that, they moved on from their old defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, and they brought in the former defensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans in Shane Bowen. And I personally didn't know too much about Shane Bowen, but so far through OTAs and mandatory minicamp, he has received a lot of praise, and now we got a chance to see why that was and what he is bringing to this team a little bit out of the mind of Bobby Okereke. The linebacker for the New York Giants appeared on the Up and Adams show this past week to talk about the differences he's already noticing from Wink Martindale's defense to now with Shane Bowen. He said it's almost about as 180 of a flip as it can be. Going from Wink, I loved that system, attacking, blitzing all the time, to Shane, very methodical, probably one of the most cerebral defensive coordinators I've ever been around. Just the way he sees the game, the way he's gonna call it, the way he coaches it, the attention to detail. Yeah, I think we're gonna dominate this year, and it's gonna be led by him. And those are pretty strong words to describe this defense. Saying that you're going to dominate is a great goal to have, is a great mindset to have, because they do have the pieces. I do like saying that they brought in a lot of pieces that I did like Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle from Buffalo, Brian Burns, obviously trading for him. They drafted Tyler Nubin, which I thought was huge after losing Xavier McKinney. You bring in another young top safety in the draft. I really like that addition. He seems like he's ready, one of the players that was ready to play right now. And you also signed Jalen Mills from the New England Patriots to add some talent to that secondary, and really just at all levels, of the defensive line, the linebacker position, and the secondary as well. And with how Okereke is talking about this defense, it's looking very optimistic, at least because in comparison to last year, being sixth in the most total yards allowed per game, seventh in the most points per game allowed as well. It's hard to be worse than those numbers, even if it's a passing league, even if the NFL is pushing for more points on the board, it's hard to be worse than that. So in comparison to that, I feel like they are going to get better. The Titans had a very solid defense last year, even though they were in a weird period with it being the last year for Mike Vrabel, and they were just in a new spot with a new quarterback coming in, Hopkins coming in. There was a lot of moving pieces. The defense still was all right for them, and now he comes over to, I think, a more talented defense with already having Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Bobby Okereke on there as well. They have some interesting pieces where they could definitely do something with, and make it look a little bit more solid with it in 2024. And I think it's much needed. I think it's much needed because there's a lot of tension around this building right now, with Hard Knocks infiltrating this team, really giving everybody an insight on what the operations are look like, and sort of explaining some of these reasons why the Giants let Saquon walk, why they paid Daniel Jones, why they're making these trades. They're getting an inside look at all of that, and I think from some of the fans and just from play in general, there's a lot of tension surrounding the Giants, especially heading into this season. It's going to be a big one. There's a lot of expectations to at least see some life out of this team next season. Like I mentioned, with everything, it's a prove-it year for Daniel Jones. Saquon left. Brian Dable and Joe Shane, what's their status going to look like if they have another poor year? Will the Giants actually move on from Brian Dable, move on from both of them, keep Brian Dable, move on from Joe Shane? All of that right now is in the air, and it looks to be like the main focus is on the offense, right? Because all the attention goes to the quarterback, and because the NFL is a passing league, that's what brings in the most stories. If your offense, it almost seems like if your offense is putting up less than 18 points per game or 17 points per game minimum, the alarm bells are going off. The national media is focusing in on your team. What's wrong with the offense? Why is it so bad? This day and age, you have to score almost close to 20 points per game as the minimum to be seen as a decent team. And the Giants weren't really there last year, obviously, on offense. And now there's a lot of new pieces coming in, a lot more expectations for them to at least show some more life. How could they alleviate some of that? What could help them and at least save them in some of these games is probably going to be the defense. And that's where I get into this question now that I started thinking of when I was making and preparing for this segment was, let's say the Giants defense is actually like really good. If they're actually up there, top 12, maybe top 10, do I dare say, in the NFL, those are pretty lofty goals if they're going to dominate like Okereke says. I think if they get up to top 10, top 12, that would be extraordinary for this team to get back to playing absolutely great defense. But the question is, can a top defense like that, top 10, top 12, is that going to be able to cover up and mask some of the offensive deficiencies if they do continue to happen in 2024? So Daniel Jones is still not looking great. Malik Neighbors really isn't getting the ball. He's frustrated. The running game's not really there, moving on from Saquon. If their offense just continues to stutter in 2024, will a very dominant top 10 defense be able to cover that up and sort of extend this period of judgment, per se, for the New York Giants past 2024? It was a pretty tough one when I was thinking about it, just because I want to say yes, because your defense is really good, and I think it stands out more because it is a passing league and it is so offense-based and offense-heavy. But in that same breath, the Giants have really been dancing around the fact that they made a wrong choice with Daniel Jones, I believe, and now they're giving him this extra year. Well, not extra year because it isn't his contract, but a lot of teams or a lot of people in the NFL felt that this year was the year to move on from Daniel Jones. There was all those reports saying that the Giants were done with him, but now you're seeing Joe Shane on Hard Knocks saying that this is the prove-it year for him. They got to give him a chance at least. So now you're extending it a little bit further, maybe causing some more frustration within the fan base and just within the city overall for all the Giants fans in the city. So I think this has been extended a little bit longer than most would have hoped for, and I don't think a top 10 defense will really be able to cover up if this offense is really bad. Like, if this offense, again, is putting up 15 points, 16 points per game, no more than that, I don't think a top defense will really be able to save you at that point, just because in that same breath that I'm saying, in the same breath that I said that a top defense could, show out a little bit more because everyone's putting up points, and if your defense is stopping them, people could look at it more and say, wow, like, they must be really good because this team is putting up 20 consistently, and now when they play the Giants, they're really struggling. But in that same breath, that could only hold up for so long. Offenses are almost too good now all over the league where you can only hold a team for so long before your offense, or your defense is out there for 60, 70% of the game, and fatigue starts to set in by that third quarter. You might not be getting blown out, but at the same time, your defense is starting to get tired. They don't have that same pop, and you're giving up scores, you're giving up leads, you're losing the game towards the end of the game a lot more often, and then that might be even more frustrating then because you've stayed within the confines of the game. You're not getting blown out. Your defense has been keeping you in it the majority of the game, but you're still losing them in the end by letting up a score, your offense not being able to respond, and all that sort of thing. I don't think it'll really mask anything for the Giants if they're not putting up points and if they're not winning, especially because I don't have their record from last year, but obviously it wasn't a good one. It was another disappointing season. So if they don't drastically improve from that, if they don't get to at least 500 or a game above 500, I think the writing is pretty much already on the wall. So I feel like people are knowing that this year's probably going to be the last year for Daniel, for maybe Brian Dable. They already have that in their minds. So if you don't really do something to drastically change that, offensive wise, it's not going to be enough for this defense to save you. It's going to keep you in games, so that could be encouraging, but that could be just a gateway to the next phase of this, to the next regimen that comes in. A new head coach that comes in. Bill Belichick is out there. He seems to be the favorite. So having a great defense this year is great and all, but it could just be a great stepping stone and a good thing to have for the next head coach to come in, because again, the offense nowadays has to be good enough to at least put up 20 points, 19 points for you just to get by, just for you to really have a chance in this league. Not a lot of teams are averaging less than 17 or 18 points a game. You find it very rare that they are, and if you are and you're somehow still winning, it's almost a miracle at that point. But I just don't see the Giants' defense, one, being able to be that good already, just in his first year as a defensive coordinator for Shane Bowen. Their pieces are nice. They have a great defensive line on paper, but I have to see it. They have a lot of young pieces on that defense as well, so I have to see how efficient it is. It might not even be up there, so I'm just assuming at that point, for the sake of the question, their defense could be middle of the league, maybe towards the 20s, and then you really have a problem because you can't stop anybody, and your offense might not be able to keep up anyway. So I'm hoping for the best outcome with a better defense, like Bobby Okereke is suggesting, because they do have good players, but thinking big picture, thinking of how the Giants could move on with this as a positive, it doesn't seem like it'll be enough for me to mask the offense if it is just performing as well as it did last year. Then we get into a whole new conversation about finding a new quarterback and all that stuff that just gets drawn out. But that's how I feel about it. It's looking more promising on the defensive side. I will give the Giants that. But how much really is it going to help this team in 2024? We're just going to have to wait and see. But again, we're going to go to our next break. We're going to leave that topic there. I'm sure I'm going to touch on it later on. We have two more segments to talk about regarding Josh Jacobs and him really going at his former team, the Las Vegas Raiders, blasting them for their losing mentality and why he felt that it was just not going to work with how they were thinking over there in Las Vegas. And staying on the topic of running backs, Rachaad White in Tampa Bay, we're going to talk about the goals that he has in 2024, and if he reaches those goals, are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers good enough to repeat as NFC South champions? Those two topics are coming up in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere.